Uncle's Dream. From the Annals of Mordassov. Chapter 1. Marya Alexandrovna Moskalev is the leading lady in Mordassov, and of that there can be no possible question. She behaves as though she were independent of everyone, and everyone else were dependent on her. It is true that scarcely anyone likes her, and indeed very many people sincerely hate her. But on the other hand, everyone is afraid of her, and that is just what she wants. Such a desire betokens a high degree of diplomacy. How is it, for instance, that Marya Alexandrovna, who is desperately fond of gossip and cannot sleep all night if she has not heard something new the day before, how is it that with all that she knows how to deport herself so that it would never occur to anyone looking at her that this majestic lady was the greatest gossip in the world, or at any rate in Mordassov? One would suppose, on the contrary, that gossip would die away in her presence, that backbiters would blush and tremble like schoolboys confronting their teacher, and that the conversation would not deal with any but the loftiest subjects. She knows about some of the Mordassov people facts so scandalous and so important that if she were to tell them on a suitable occasion and to make them public, as she so well knows how to do, there would be a regular earthquake of Lisbon in Mordassov. And at the same time she is very reserved over these secrets, and will only tell them in extreme cases, and then only to her most intimate female friends. She confines herself to frightening people with hints at what she knows, and likes better to keep a man or a lady in continual apprehension than to deal them a final blow. That is intelligence. That is diplomacy. Marya Alexandrovna was always distinguished among us by her irreproachable comme il faut, upon which we all model ourselves. As regards comme il faut, she is without a rival in Mordassov. She can, for instance, kill, tear to pieces, annihilate a rival with a single word, a performance we have witnessed. And at the same time she will have the air of not observing that she has uttered that word. And we all know that this ability is characteristic of the very highest society. In fact, at all such tricks she is a match for Pinetti. Her connections are immense. Many persons who have visited Mordassov have been delighted with her hospitality, and have even kept up a correspondence with her after their departure. Someone even wrote her a poem, and Marya Alexandrovna showed it to us all with pride. One literary visitor dedicated to her his novel, which he read aloud to her in the evenings, and this made an extremely agreeable impression. A learned German who came from Karlsruhe expressly to study some kind of worm with horns, which is found in our province, and who wrote 4 quarto volumes on the creature in question, was so enchanted by Marya Alexandrovna's hospitality and politeness that to this day he keeps up with her a correspondence of the most respectful and highly moral tone from Karlsruhe. Marya Alexandrovna has even been compared in one respect with Napoleon. This comparison was of course made in jest by her enemies, more by way of sarcasm than truth. But while fully admitting the oddity of the comparison, I make bold to ask one innocent question. Why was Napoleon's head turned at last when he was too greatly exalted? The champions of the old dynasty used to ascribe this to the fact that Napoleon was not only not of royal blood, but was not even a gentilhomme of good family, and so was naturally alarmed at last by his own exalted state and was conscious of his real position. In spite of the obvious cleverness of this surmise, which recalls the most brilliant period of the old French court, I venture to add in my turn, how was it that Marya Alexandrovna's head was never under any circumstances turned? How was it that she always remained the leading lady in Mordasov? There were occasions when everybody asked, "How will Marya Alexandrovna act now in such difficult circumstances?" But the circumstances arrived and passed, and all went well. Everything remained satisfactory as before, even better than before. Everyone remembers, for instance, how her husband, Afanasy Matveyevich, was deprived of his post owing to his incompetence and feeble-mindedness, which excited the wrath of an inspector from the capital. Everyone thought that Marya Alexandrovna would be depressed, would be humbled, would entreat and petition, would, in short, be crestfallen. Nothing of the sort. Marya Alexandrovna grasped that nothing could be gained by petitioning, and played her cards so well that she lost nothing of her influence in society, and her house is still looked upon as the house of most consequence in Mordasov. Anna Nikolaevna Antipov, the public prosecutor's wife, a sworn foe of Marya Alexandrovna's, though externally her friend, was already trumpeting her victory. But when we saw that Marya Alexandrovna could not be easily put to confusion, we realized that she had sent her roots far more deeply down than we had supposed. By the way, since we have mentioned him, we will say a few words about Afanasy Matveyevich, Marya Alexandrovna's husband. In the first place, he was a man of very presentable exterior, and indeed of very correct principles. Only on critical occasions he somehow lost his head, and looked like a sheep facing a new gate. He was extraordinarily dignified, especially in his white tie at name-day dinners, but his dignified air and presentability only lasted till the minute when he began to speak. Then there was nothing for it, if I may say so, but cotton wool in one's ears. He certainly was not worthy to belong to Marya Alexandrovna. That was the universal opinion. He had only kept his position through the genius of his wife. In my private judgment, he ought long ago to have been in the kitchen garden scaring sparrows. There, and only there, he might have been of real unquestionable service to his fellow countrymen. And so Marya Alexandrovna acted admirably in sending Afanasy Matveyevich to their country place, 2.5 miles from Mordasov, where she had 120 serfs. In parenthesis, I may say, the whole property, the whole fortune upon which she so worthily maintained the dignity of her household. Everybody knew that she had kept Afanasy Matveyevich about her solely because he was in the government service and in receipt of a salary and of other sums. As soon as he ceased to receive a salary and other sums, she immediately removed him to a distance on account of his incompetence and absolute uselessness. And everyone commended Marya Alexandrovna's clear-sightedness and decision of character. In the country, Afanasy Matveyevich is in clover. I went to see him and spent a whole hour with him fairly pleasantly. He tries on his white cravats, cleans his boots with his own hands, not from necessity, but simply for love of the art, because he likes his boots to shine. He drinks tea 3 times a day, is exceedingly fond of going to the bath-house, and is contented. Do you remember the horrid scandal that was concocted among us 1.5 years ago concerning Zinaida Afanasyevna, the only daughter of Marya Alexandrovna and Afanasy Matveyevich? Zinaida Afanasyevna is unquestionably beautiful and is extremely well educated, yet she is 23 and is still unmarried. Among the reasons people give for Zina's being unmarried, One of the chief is considered to be the sinister rumor of some strange intimacy a year and a half ago with the wretched district schoolmaster, a rumor which has persisted to this day. Even now there is talk of some love letter written by Zina and said to have been passed from hand to hand in Mordassov. But I should like to know if anyone has seen that letter. If it has passed from hand to hand, what has become of it? Everyone has heard about it, but nobody has seen it. I, at any rate, have never come across anyone who has seen this letter with his own eyes. If you drop a hint about it to Marya Alexandrovna, she simply fails to understand you. Now, let us assume that there really was something, and Zina did write this love letter. I fancy, indeed, that it must have been so. How skilful it all was on Marya Alexandrovna's part! How adroitly was this awkward, scandalous affair suppressed and stifled! Not a trace, not a hint. Marya Alexandrovna takes no notice now of this ignoble slander, and at the same time, God knows how she may have worked to save the honor of her only daughter from the slightest slur. And as for Zina's not being married, that's very natural. There are no eligible young men here. The only fitting match for Zina would be a reigning prince. Have you ever seen a beauty like her? It is true that she is proud, too proud. They say that Mozgliakov is paying her his addresses, but it is hardly likely to come to a marriage. What is Mozgliakov? It is true that he is young, not bad-looking, a dandy, has 150 serfs not mortgaged, and comes from Petersburg. But in the first place, you know he is not quite sound in the upper story. He is feather-headed, a chatterbox, and has some very new-fangled ideas. And after all, what is an estate of 150 serfs, especially with new-fangled ideas? That marriage won't come off. All that the kind reader has read so far was written by me 5 months ago, entirely from excess of feeling. I may as well confess betimes I have rather a partiality for Marya Alexandrovna. I wanted to write something like a eulogy on that magnificent lady, and to put it in the shape of a playful letter to a friend, on the model of the letters which used at one time, in the golden days that, thank God, will never return, to be published in the Northern Bee and other periodicals. But as I have no friend, and have, moreover, a certain innate literary timidity, my work has remained in my table drawer as my first literary effort, and a memento of peaceful recreation in hours of leisure and comfort. 5 months have passed, and all at once a wonderful event has occurred in Mordassov. Early one morning, Prince K. arrived in the town and stopped at Marya Alexandrovna's house. The consequences of this arrival have been innumerable. The prince spent only 3 days in Mordassov, but those 3 days have left behind them momentous memories that will never be effaced. I will say more. Prince K. produced, in a certain sense, a revolution in our town. The story of that revolution is, of course, one of the most significant pages in the annals of Mordassov. That page I have made up my mind at last, after some hesitation, to put into literary shape and lay before the criticism of the honored public. My story will contain the full and remarkable history of the exaltation, glory, and solemn downfall of Marya Alexandrovna and all her family, a worthy and alluring theme for an author. First of all, of course, I must explain what there was wonderful in Prince K.'s arriving in our town and staying at Marya Alexandrovna's. And to do that I must, of course, say a few words about Prince K. himself. And that I will do. Besides, the biography of that personage is absolutely essential for all the further development of our story. And so I will begin. Breaking in. And so we now have a sense of who our narrator is. The irony will not always be so obviously on display as we go forward, but it never does disappear altogether. The Northern Bee was a conservative newspaper for the middle class that had been popular in the 1840s. Apparently, our narrator doesn't quite want to be associated with it, even if he was attempting to emulate its style in the first part of this chapter. When we learn that, with her diplomatic tricks, Marya Alexandrovna is a match for Pinetti, she is being compared to a famous Italian illusionist from the 18th century who passed off his sleight of hand for demonstrations of physics. Of course, she is also compared to Napoleon, which may be of special interest to those of you who have read Crime and Punishment. This is not the first, and certainly not the last, reference to Napoleon in the Dostoevsky corpus. I'll say just a little on this issue in the concluding comments. When Afanasy Matveyevich's government post is assumed to have come with both a salary and other sums, we should understand that it offered opportunity for corrupt profiteering. It is possible that Afanasy Matveyevich lost his post because he was too daft to handle the seedy side of government bureaucratic life tactfully. All of the characters mentioned here will be important going forward, including the as-yet unnamed schoolteacher. As the roster of names gets crowded, feel free to make use of the dramatis personae in the introduction as a reference. End of comments.